It's competitive out there. Like, I'm competing not just against other newsletters, I'm competing against anything else that takes your time. You could be listening to a Nickelback album right now, but instead you're listening to this.
I have to go. I didn't know that was an option for me. The biggest obstacle is boredom. So you got to get boredom out of the way. And the way you get boredom out of the way is you got to be comfortable being bored and don't take it as a signal that you're off track.
The big goal, if I was to put it on a sign, is to be the best business podcast and newsletter for the C-suite at private equity and venture-backed companies.
What you're actually tapping into is like the form of compound interest that comes from putting your ideas out there. Because before you know it, you turn around and you got a big pile of stuff.
Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Welcome back to Run the Numbers. This is a special episode because the tables are flipped. My friend Paul Stansik, an operating partner at private equity firm ParkerGale, interviews yours truly. Paul and I bonded over our love of CAC payback periods and writing online. He writes the fantastic Hello Operator newsletter on Substack. We originally planned to do a podcast on annual planning best practices, honing in on how his portfolio companies are preparing their top-line operating plans. But one thing led to another, and we were more excited to talk about Mostly Media and how I'm planning for next year. That's right, your boy does some annual planning for his own company. This is the first year I've been the boss of me, having successfully exited the company I was CFO of in January of 2025. Paul and I dig into the origin story of Mostly Metrics, my newsletter, and how it spawned a media company in this very podcast you're listening to right now. Paul didn't pull any punches. He asked me everything from where I'm looking to expand to how much money this kind of business can generate. So if you're wondering how I got into doing this as a career or the ins and outs of running a niche B2B media company, this one is for you. All this and much, much more after a short word from our sponsors. All right, I got to get up on my soapbox for a sec here. Everybody's talking about AI-powered this and automated that, but here's the thing about revenue recognition. It's not just about moving data around. It's about getting it right, full stop. So RightRev is laser focused on one thing, RevRec that auditors actually trust. See, there's a difference between automating revenue processes and automating revenue recognition correctly. RightRev was actually built by the godfather of RevRec, who understands ASC 606 compliance, audit controls, data validation, and the flexibility needed for complex B2B contracts. We're not trying to be your billing system or your ERP. We're the revenue recognition engine that sits between your contracts and your financials, making sure every dollar is recognized correctly, on time, every time. Companies like Snowflake and Logic Monitor don't just need fast revenue reporting, they need revenue reporting that's audit ready from day one. And that's honestly where RightRev shines. And what I love about RightRev is they're not out there trying to be everything to everyone and just slap some, AI slop on top of it. While everyone is building these massive platforms that do everything in a kind of mediocre fashion, RightRev does one thing exceptionally well. They make sure your revenue recognition is bulletproof. Ready to stop gambling with your RevRec? Visit RightRev.com to see how we make complex revenue simple. That's RightRev.com, where revenue recognition actually works. Did you know that around 40% of manually processed invoices contain errors, missing data, bad codes, duplicates? And those mistakes don't just slow your finance team down, they cost you money. That's why global finance automation matters. It's not just about saving time, it's about keeping your business safe from costly errors. And that's exactly what Tipalti does. Tipalti is the serious AP solution for serious business. Tipalti automates the end-to-end payables process, handling everything from onboarding suppliers to global payouts, all so your finance team can breathe again. More than 5,000, of the world's most ambitious businesses already rely on Tipalti to make payments in over 200 countries and 120 currencies. With baked-in security and tax compliance, Tipalti gives you the confidence to scale globally without adding extra finance headcount. Give your finance team their time back. Don't let bad invoices drain good money. Visit Tipalti.com/runthenumbers. Tipalti.com/runthenumbers. Tipalti, serious AP for serious business. So if you listen to this podcast, you'll know that I am incredibly passionate about the FP&A space because that's the route I went to get to CFO. And I want to tell you about a tool that has exploded over the past few years. It's called Aleph. And I remember getting outbounded by them about 2.5 years ago, and I actually took the bait because they claimed to be able to do a demo with my live data, with me right there on the call. And so I had to see it to believe it. And it was the founder running demos back then. Shout out Albert, hope you're listening. And he connected my NetSuite and built my P&L using their Excel add-in in like 15 minutes. And I was really impressed. Since then, Aleph has gone on to raise money from some of the top VCs out there, and they've built an impressive roster of customers. Many of their customers have been on the podcast, like the CFO at Turo, 8 Sleep, and Zapier. They're all really big champions and supporters of Aleph like me. But it's not just an Excel add-in. Aleph also allows finance teams to work with their live cross-system data using Google Sheets and their web app. And that's cool because it gives teams the option to support a wide range of needs and workflows like budgeting, forecasting, and variance analysis. And speaking of variance analysis, they're doing some really cool things with AI-powered variance analysis. It basically allows you to figure out what's going on and why, and it takes the time that you'd usually spend from hours to minutes. It's really cool. And so I highly recommend checking them out and taking them up on that demo or trial, just like I did back in the day. And you can learn more and get started at getaleph.com/run. That is getaleph.com. aleph.com/run. Tell them CJ sent you. Paul, it's good to see you, my man.
Good to see you, man. Episode 2. Let's do it.
The boys are running it back.
Assuming we're the boys, then yes, that's what we're doing. We are running it back right now. And this is kind of plan B for the episode that we were talking about, right? Because we were going to go very calendar driven before and talk about the fact that it's budget season and talk about all the mistakes that you can make when you're building a budget from a go-to-market and top-line perspective. And we talked about that for a little bit. I think we even have like a 30% done agenda for that podcast if we ever get to it. But then we got off track, as we do.
Way off
track. And we started talking about what you're doing and the fact that this thing is becoming a business and how much fun you're having with it. And then we started talking about what you think it might become. And I think 45 minutes into that conversation, we kind of said, man, this is the podcast we should do.
The world does not need more lawyers, and they didn't need another podcast on annual planning. Or maybe they do, but at a later date.
I think they still need it, and they probably need it before Q4 is out. So let's resolve to give that to the people. But I think this is the more interesting conversation to have. And there's a lot of people listening, more people listening every week. And I'm sure they're interested not only in what you have to say, but in how you're thinking about building this business. So that's what I want to talk about today is what is this thing? What is this thing becoming? What are you working on behind the scenes? And where do you think you can take it? Because the origin story is very interesting. Like you started this thing by scratching your own itch, and then you had a moment where you realized it could become something. It's done that. And I think you see the runway. I see the runway. So let's talk about that. But like we're in this moment on the internet where newsletters are kind of a thing in a way that they weren't 5 or 10 years ago. There's all this different writing out there about how to start a newsletter, the businesses that can support and kind of turn into, but you've kind of put your own twist on this thing. Maybe we start at the beginning. Like when did you start writing on the internet? And when did you realize like, hey, I've got something here that I should probably commit to in a small way and get more consistent on?
Well, starting to write and realizing I had something were actually pretty far apart. And people think it was overnight where it was just like I sat down on my laptop and put out an email into the universe and the people came. But I started writing December of 2020. I was living at my parents' cottage in Cape Cod during the winter and during COVID. And I needed something to do. And I was working at this hypergrowth software company at the time. And I was learning a ton. I was helping to raise a lot of money. I was leading the FP&A and IR functions. And I realized that people were paid for the playbooks that they had. Hey, I can be the guy that gets you from 0 to 10 million. The guy or girl who gets you from 50 to 100 million. And we were growing so fast that A, I was terrified that I was going to forget it and not be able to get hired for that playbook. B, I always enjoyed writing, and I felt like there weren't answers to things that I'd Googled. My wife used to call it pejoratively your book report thing. I think she called it like your weird book report thing that you do, writing for nerds online. And so that's how I started putting pen to paper, and I was doing it on Substack.
Do you remember the first thing that you put out that got real traction and where you got real feedback and you kind of thought to yourself, like, hey, I should be doing more of this, or I should take this more seriously?
Yeah, it took a while. So people don't realize that for over 2 years, I had only 400 subscribers.
Yep. I had a similar experience myself. Yep.
You know how it feels. You have to be a truly crazy person to just keep yelling into the void.
Correct.
I think the first piece that got some traction was on explaining cash burn and the different ways to measure it.
I've read that one.
And I had one before that did pretty well. This one had a bunch of memes from Breaking Bad, and I think people are like, this is the most like off the wall thing that you're talking about, burn multiple, and it's Walter White in his underpants burning something next to a meth lab. Like, is this a smart thing? Is this like a joke? I don't really know. And I was still at the stage back then, Paul, where I would look at every single free email on who came in and subscribed it.
Yep.
And I had this folder. I didn't even have a business email yet. They were all going to my Yahoo account. It would notify me. And I had a folder called Big Ballers. And whenever somebody big came in, I would put it into the folder. That's how few subscribers I had back then.
That's awesome. I mean, I still look when people come through, and I will connect with people on LinkedIn and just say, hey, just putting face to a name. Thanks for reading. And I don't do it for everybody, but there's a little bit of like a half-ass ideal customer profile selection thing going on with, not quite a handwritten note, but the digital equivalent of that. And when I talk to people that have done what you're doing, like they start writing, it turns into something. And there's many forms of that. Like I've noticed that's a habit a lot of people have, is just like staying very connected to early readers. And it's the first time I've heard of the Big Ballers folder. Maybe I need one of those in my Outlook. That might be a best practice you could adopt out there. That cash burn one, I think it exemplifies your brand too, right? Because we talked about this, like the feeling you want people to have when they read your stuff is pretty important to you.
It's so important to me.
What do you want people to feel when they read your stuff, when they engage with your content? Because it's different than the classic feeling of a CFO type persona who's putting stuff out there.
Well, I was actually talking to producer Ben, our benevolent dictator, the other day. He's like, when you started this, what were you chasing? Was it about money? And I said, no, it was the feeling from my parents' basement of being 1 Miller Lite deep at 9 p.m. being like, this piece is going to slap tomorrow. Like, just linking up something completely like odd that my brain connected these two things. Like I have this financial forecast here, and then I can make some witty comment about it down there. I've always been chasing that feeling, seeing that feeling in other people as like, oh, this isn't an email. This is a product. This is something that was built with me in mind. It taps into both my educational side of things. It taps into maybe the imposter syndrome I have of being in this tech world where everyone is so smart. And it taps into the entertainment side of things. And I don't know, it was just a reflection, I think, of how my brain works and this dopamine hit that I would get.
You put out this cash burn piece, and I'm collapsing the timeline a little bit, and you're like, hey, I got something here. I should take this serious. I should do more of it. You've become pretty prolific because the newsletter now is what, 3 a week is kind of the pace you're on?
What people don't realize is I wasn't the CFO yet when I started this. So I actually, and this is like the inside baseball that like people want to make it look like it's all up and to the right. I don't know if you'd call it I left or I got fired, or we agreed that this wasn't going to work anymore.
It was amicable is the important detail for those of you keeping score at home.
Yeah, because I was writing a newsletter at this company that like was like, dude, you're running IR, you're doing FP&A. Why are you putting these things out into the world? And I was like, because I get energy from it. And also the people reading it are pretty smart and they want to talk to us as a result. It's actually creating a great surface area for us to bring the company into it. And so we got to a point where I was just like, yeah, this isn't going to work anymore if I want to do this. And at the time I think I just hit 4,000 free subscribers. I had never monetized anything. I had my first kid on the way. I just said, fuck that, I'm out. And I left $1 million of equity on the table at that company. At the time, I remember my parents just being like, I can't make sense of this. Why would you do this? Like you had a hot hand. You did everything right into this point, and you're going to do like this email thing. Like, I don't get it. And obviously my employer at the time didn't get it, but the people who were reading the newsletter got it. And one of them was in and around the OpenView community, one of the companies who'd invested in parts tech. And they said, do you want to interview for this role? So on one hand, you had, hey, we don't want you anymore because you're doing this thing. And then on the other hand, I had somebody saying, you're 31 years old at the time. Do you want to be a CFO? So I got both ends of the spectrum there of like, you can't have this, but you can have this thing that's also great. And so in that sense, I essentially wrote my way into my first CFO job.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole undercurrent here of like, what is marketing? And I think the thing that your previous employer didn't understand is like, marketing is anything that gets customers. And even if it doesn't look like marketing or walk like marketing or talk like marketing, people were coming your way or the company's way because of the content that you were putting out. And getting an interview is a form of, I don't know, proof that your marketing is working, but the product is you, right? So I'm not surprised that happened. So you land your CFO gig, and it feels like that was an accelerant for you kind of learning and earning the playbook, as I've heard you say elsewhere. So talk about like that chapter and how that fed into what this is becoming.
It coincided with the newsletter really taking off, where it went from, say, I'm going from 400 to 800 subscribers in this month, to being like, hey, I'm gaining 2,000 subscribers this month, just up and to the left. And I can, if you want, talk about like how I not growth hacked, but was very thoughtful about the online real estate I wanted to be in and around. Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. A messy or missing cap table might not just slow you down, it could cost you your next fundraising round. VCs get flooded with pitches, and if your equity is confusing or missing, they'll move on fast. Fidelity Private Shares is an all-in-one equity management platform that helps you maintain a clean cap table, an organized data room, and a clear equity story. Schedule a demo at fidelityprivateshares.com, mention Mostly Metrics, and get 20% off. Are you running a small or mid-sized business? Then you need more than spreadsheets or basic tools. You need Sage Intacct, the all-in-one cloud platform for accounting, ERP, and financial management. It's built for businesses like yours across industries like retail, financial services, logistics, tech, professional services, and more. Sage Intacct outperforms QuickBooks, beats NetSuite on flexibility, and delivers fast ROI, up to 250% with payback in under 6 months. Rated #1 in customer satisfaction for 8 straight years. That's not luck, folks. It's Sage Intacct. Check out the Sage Intacct financial management platform using the link in the show notes below and take control of your growth. This episode of Run the Numbers is brought to you by Mercury, business banking for founders and finance pros who want their financial stack to actually work together. Now, I don't plug tools I don't know or intimately use. I've been a Mercury customer for a couple of years now. In fact, I showed the Mercury dashboard to their CFO, Daniel Kang, from their finance team right before we hit record on this episode. It felt like a full circle moment. And what I love most is that Mercury isn't just banking, it's operational confidence. I can send a wire to a podcast editor, I can check capital balances, and I can approve a payment for a freelancer who helped me with a tech stack report, all without bouncing across tabs or praying a PDF exported correctly. Mercury's making a bet on builders. Whether you're issuing your first invoice or wiring 7 figures for a warehouse build-out, it's banking that scales with your ambition. Visit Mercury.com to apply online in minutes and see why over 200,000, entrepreneurs choose Mercury to run their business finances smarter. Here comes my banking voice. Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services provided by Choice Financial Group, Column NA, Evolve Bank and Trust, members FDIC. The IO card is issued by Patriot Bank, members FDIC, pursuant to a license from MasterCard.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because there's an element of just like, if you keep writing, people will keep showing up, that if the stuff is good, which I think is it's really motivating. The fact that you keep doing your thing and people will hop on board, but there are ways to accelerate that, but there's not one way to do it. Like, everybody finds their way to accelerate it. So what did you find, or what did you try, or what ultimately caught on for you?
So there were 3 things. The simplest one was I went out and made actual relationships with the people who I would refer on Substack, they would or recommend back to me. And so I knew everybody that I was doing that with, and we had a good relationship, and I actually read their stuff. So there was that good content market fit, because if somebody would come over, they'd actually retain most of the time. The second thing I did is I was a complete psychopath. I had a list. I probably still have it on my iPhone in my notes. and it was 20 different terms. So it'd be like net dollar retention, CAC payback period, burn multiple. And every night, me and my wife would be watching TV, and I would go on Twitter and type in each of those terms individually. And if somebody had mentioned them, I would be the reply guy in the comments. I did this every night for like a year.
That's
And
killer.
I would write something insightful and be like, oh, by the way, and if you really want to dork out on this, check out this, what I wrote here. And so Paul, you were going to find me if you wanted to learn about net dollar retention rate. Like that was my piece of online turf. Like I was going to be unavoidable. So that was the second thing. The third thing I did is I reached out to brands, and what I cracked the code on is there were a lot of people who were middle managers or they were ICs, and every week they had to come up with something creative to say about the CFO space. Secret is a lot of them have no financial experience, and they're just writing about stuff that are from other blog posts that are kind of recycled from people who also don't have experience. I reached out to them and said, can I write something for you? And I'll do it for free. And what that did is they all had their own customer and marketing distributions. They would send out a guest post from me. And a funny thing happened there. I could then take that and repurpose it on mine too. So I'm killing two birds with one stone. I would get people who were reading their thing. And then I remember I did a guest post for Ramp back in the day. And Brex reached out. Shout out to Brex, longest term sponsor, near and dear to my heart. They reached out and just automatically assumed I was getting paid to do these. So I said, yeah, I'm getting paid to do these. So then that was the first time that I ever monetized something.
Yeah, it's almost like your prison style SEO and backlink strategy. But the cool thing about that is like like on the internet, it's possible to go find where the conversations are happening and participate in those conversations.
I got kicked off of so many Reddit boards. It was unbelievable.
I was gonna say, shout out to the admins who were doing their job and keeping the watch. Let's talk about you taking the leap, because you're still at this point in the story. You still got a full-time gig. This is still your side thing. But eventually, like in the not too recent past, you committed to this full time. And I'm sure that was a big decision and you thought about it really hard, but there's also a little bit of like YOLO to that decision.
Oh, totally.
Talk about that transition and then talk about how it's going.
Well, the podcast traction, because I started that as well. I started that while I was working at Parts Tech, and my CEO was super cool about it. Like, shout out to Greg for always supporting me with that. And he was very aware that we were getting great deals on software because of it. We got a lot of stuff for free. And then we also had investors who would reach out and wanted to talk to us because we were in vertical software. It's not the sexiest thing in the world. And it was in the automotive sector. So he's like, oh, like Iconic wants to talk to us? Like, we're over here slinging brake pads. Of course. Yeah. Like keep doing whatever the hell you're doing over there online. And so I kept doing that. The guests kept getting better. I realized that could become another valuable area to monetize. And I'm doing the CFO gig in the background the whole time. And so I definitely was burning the candle at both ends because I took my job extremely seriously. I did not want to mess that up. To me, it was like, I didn't want to be like this dilettante who, what do they say? Those who can't do teach. I never wanted to be that person where they're like, well, he couldn't crack it as a CFO, you know, he only lasted a year, or he never sold a company. What would he know about M&A? Like, I wanted to make sure that was not the case. I wanted to ace that test. And in the back of my mind, it got to a point where I knew I could have the cash runway from, even if I did want to just, you know, pick up my ball and go play elsewhere, like I could do that. But to me, it was more important to show that I exited a company and I drove the car from A to B and people were happy about it. And so there definitely was like this decision moment. Luckily, the decision moment was at the end of a successful sale.
Was there a family conversation after that where you said like, hey, I think I'm going to do this thing? And how did you guys think about that?
My wife always wanted me to go and do it, I think, because she saw how happy I was. I think I'm just a more enjoyable person when I'm creative and fun to be around. And she knew it would have better hours too for our family because I get young kids. I don't think my parents ever, they still ask me to this day, like, so when are you thinking about getting another CFO job? I'm like, you don't get it, do you? And I love them. No shade there, but they're like, so you climbed up this ladder to become this thing. And now you're doing this totally different thing. And I'm like, it's different. It's not wrong. It's just a different thing. But at that point I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this my full-time thing and give it like a real go. And I think in my whole career, I've always had this element of just wanting to bet on myself. I may not be able to hit the half court shot at the end of the game, but I'm probably going to tell the coach like I want to take it. And so I think that's pretty similar, like with my own company.
So let's talk about the company, because there's a lot written out there on this solopreneurship movement. I don't know if you put yourself in that camp or not. There's a lot of labels for this stuff, and there's a lot of like how-to playbooks for how to grow an audience, how to put content out there. There's a lot of advice, good and bad, about like what makes good content. There's a lot less written about like kind of the CFO lens on a business like this, which is literally like, how do you make money? What are the different revenue streams? How do you think about like the startup costs? Like, you've got this amazing looking studio, so clearly you voted with your checkbook a little bit to get after this thing, and it looks great. You're making me self-conscious with my Sony A6400 right now. Shout out to Sony. What is the business today? How do you guys make money, and where do you think it's headed?
So this was my calculus. I said, as a startup CFO, I can go and make probably between 300 and 400K a year in cash base, right? I'll get the chance to level up the amount of equity I can get. I started out at the last company with a little bit under 1%. I think in my next role, because I have a track record now, I could get 1%. And then next role after that, 1.25. I think the best CFOs in the startup world, better than me, can get 1.5. But like, you're not going to get higher than that. And so then it becomes a bet on where you can get in on a company, how big you think you can make it, and then the certainty of that exit. And a lot of that is determined in a macro way. And then I thought about, of the CFOs I know, and I interview a ton of CFOs, and you talk to them before the call, after the call, over drinks as you meet them. I don't know many CFOs who have made double-digit millions from an exit. I know a lot of CEOs who have done that and made even billions of dollars from an exit, but like a really great private equity CFO can go and clip 5 to 8 million if it goes really well on an exit. Now, a lot of that is going to get taxed. Hopefully it's at capital gains. And you also have to do the NPV and risk adjusted for, is this even going to happen? I work backwards to how many at-bats will I have in my career to do this? And I said, what's like the risk adjusted return that I think I could get if I keep leveling up the game? And then there's also the consideration of, do I enjoy playing this game each time for 4 years?
Very
and always
important.
being the guy behind the guy.
Yeah.
My takeaway from that was essentially, if you think that you can reliably make $2 million or more a year, that's a fucking awesome life. And you get to take your daughters to swimming. You get to take them to karate. If I want to go for a run in the morning and not start work till 11 a.m., I can do that. Now it's on me. I may have to stay up later, but like, you cannot do that as a startup CFO in the same way. You're very beholden to other people. What I had to really get my mind around, though, was everything I've known so far is about running an asset. And I think there's a fundamental difference between running an asset company and running.
So what's the difference?
So an asset is meant to be sold. It's like a cow that's raised for slaughter.
Yep.
Sorry to get grimy on people there, but like, if you take on money, you have to have an exit at some point. The type of business you're working backwards to build is going to be different in terms of its profile, the people you hire, and the OKRs you have to get there. It's the Russ Hanneman, clip from Silicon Valley. Like, no, you don't want revenue. And once you have revenue, then you're no longer pre-revenue. Then you have expectations and shit. But like, the whole point is to make a little bit of money now, like in the salary, and then just make a whole whack of money all at once. And that's a different type of company. The company I'm running now, it's very meta because my job is to write about the environment that I came from, but I have to be very aware that my moat is compounding over time, and it's an excellent cash business. You can run this business at 80% profit margins, but like, I'm not doing this to dress it up and try to sell it, because it's me, my personality, and hopefully other people on this network too. But like, I'm not running something that's meant to be sold. I'm playing the game for the sake of playing the game, for the permission to continue playing the game.
Yeah, and there's quite a bit of unlearning just in terms of like the subconscious assumptions and the subconscious way that you would approach your work, right? Because this moat that you're building, which I would put the label of like authenticity on that moat in terms of like what it is and where it comes from. In some ways, it works against you if you ever thought about selling or exiting this thing, right? And so you're the brand, you're the face of it. It's your voice that makes it great and that has grown it to this point. And you do have to think about it differently because it's not this thing that you can hand off to somebody and they can pick up the operations without a hitch. It's like, no, this comes from me. This comes from the unique combinations of what I've learned and how I think and the weird pop culture references and other ingredients that we sprinkle in along the way. There's something awesome about that, but like I don't think you can say enough about how different it is than going to run an asset that, yeah, someday somebody else is going to want to pick it up at a price that's bigger than what you bought it for. What does that feel like sitting in the seat now that you have to unlearn that?
It's very odd because I used to joke, I wouldn't know what to do with $1 profits if it hit me in the face. It's a complete opposite problem now where I have to think about how to deploy capital into a business that I want to run forever. I remember this Mark Zuckerberg quote of when he was somebody, I don't know if it was AOL or someone tried to buy Facebook back in the day for $1 billion. And then he said, if I sell it, I'm probably just going to go and create Facebook again tomorrow. So why would I do that? And I think about the same thing with my business. There's so many cool things that come about just from being online. Somebody had called it the serendipity engine, which I totally agree with. I think it was maybe David Senra, like just cool things spring up from it. It's being okay with doing something a little bit different. And it's not necessarily slower moving, but it's more intentional about what moves you do make.
We'd have to go all the way down the walk, but I'm very curious on the top line, like how do you guys make money? What are you doing that brings in revenue?
You could think about it today, 40% of the revenue comes from the podcasts, plural. 40% of the revenue comes from the newsletters, plural. 10% comes from events. 5% comes from reports, and 5% come from dinners that we do. So the two main things are media. And what people get twisted is like, I have a newsletter. I'm like, no, you use that as a demand gen channel. You're just telling people when things are occurring. It's not like a product to you. There are a lot of event companies out there who think they're a media company, but they're an event company who just happen to have an email that you receive. Like me, it's the opposite. Like we'll do events, but that's not our main thing. We can get great people in a room and we love doing it, but it's more for the community and you can make some money doing it. For us, it's truly a media business. And so they try to do the back of the envelope math on my paid subscribers, and I'm approaching 2,000 there, but it pales in comparison to the advertising side of the business. So like every email that I send out that is ad sponsored, I actually make like 3 times more than what I make off of a paid email, which is kind of counterintuitive because I have to go super deep and tactical to get people to subscribe to the paid one. But my bet over time is that it'll catch up if I let it compound for long enough. And that's a more differentiated revenue stream. And so the first year that I started to monetize, we didn't have a podcast yet. We did 155,000. That was cool. Like that was great for daycare. The second year
just covers daycare probably.
Yeah. The second year, no, maybe second half of the year. That year we made 1.4 million. I went full time on it in January. And this is where I truly think that it's the old adage, like you give me 90%, you get 90% back. You give me 100%, I'll give you 1,000% back. It's in that extra 10% that the fucking cool shit happens. This year we'll get through 3 million, which is wild.
Good for you guys. Going back to like, it's a media company. So the layman would say like, oh, you're selling ads. Like that's the revenue model. But I know that you think about that in a uniquely deep way, because when you talk about this with other people, you talk about partnership is the word that you use a lot. And
it is.
I know that you structure the partnerships in an interesting way, but you also approach the partnership interpersonally in a unique way. Tell us about what that looks like for you guys and how you think about it.
It's funny because I never imagined myself being in sales, but I do think in every job, the higher you get, your job is sales. Like the partner.
You're in sales, buddy. Sorry to break it to you, but yeah.
I mean, you are too. Yep. You just may not know it. What we do is we try to align the partnerships to the procurement cycles of the people who are listening and reading. And what I tell them is, if you want to buy one ad and I sell you one ad, no one is going to wake up and be like, I do want to buy an ERP for $300,000.
It's time.
That doesn't happen. So not only that, a lot of the tools that are being purchased, you're not always in the market for it. However, you have to win the right to be in the consideration set when it is time. And what that means is you have to stretch out at minimally over a quarter to be reminded and have touch points. And so there are studies out there that show that the average consumer needs to be quote unquote touched 7 times before they'll consider making a purchase. With CFOs, I would argue it's at least 25 times that you have to be in front of them, and you have to surround them from different ways. I think about the podcast as the air game, right? And a lot of that's branding budget. The newsletter has more direct attribution. That's the demand gen game. And then you can also surround them with events and other things that we do. What we try to talk to our partners about is, listen, I've purchased these tools before. I've paid with my company's budget for these things before. The way that I found out about them and got to make a decision was through other people I trusted. And hopefully I'm somebody that the audience looks at as a practitioner, not just somebody who flew in and said, like, I actually downloaded something from QuickBooks before and tried to calculate ARR and this side cell over here and it didn't foot and the bridge got broken and my board investors got it. Like, I've been in those shoes before doing those things so I can tell the story more accurately. And also I'm reaching people at a cadence where it becomes habit forming. And then you earn the right to be, like I said, in that consideration set over time. So we don't do anything that's less than 3 months of a commitment.
And how do you think about building your team? Because you can only do so much. You got our buddy Ben, who's making you look great and me look passable right now, which is awesome. What does the team look like today, and what's it going to grow into over time?
So shout out to sales guy Matthew. He was crazy enough to go all in on this with me, and he had a baby on the way too. And so there's a common through line of people making rash decisions with small children on the way.
At very important times in their families' lives. Yeah.
Times. And so we had previously met I'd started the podcast on a network that helped me get it off the ground. And eventually over time, it just made sense where, like, I wanted this to be a full-time thing. It wasn't like I just needed production help because I was still doing a job and I wanted to bundle with the newsletter. And Matthew was like, hey man, I like you. I think I can sell your stuff really well. How about I come work with you? And so he made a big jump and he's been like my right hand on everything go to market and partnerships. And he truly does partner with people. He doesn't just try to sell you on something. Like, he wants you to be able to sell millions of dollars from whatever we do. Like, and we want to be able to show that impact. I had loosely courted Ben because he used to work at my wife's company for like 2 years. Ben, you're probably listening to this right now. He just like couldn't take the message. He didn't know that I was trying to get him to like come work here. And he'd just be like giving me like feedback on like what I should do with my studio.
Take the hint, Ben. Come on.
He'd be like, in the Lakers and Celtics, I'm like, Ben, I'm literally trying to hire you and give you money to come work here. But he finally joined in October, but I've known him for years. And that was a big bet because I said, we're going more into the world of video. It always freaks me out when people say, oh, I watch your podcast. I'm like, you watch it? Like, am I in your living room watch it? Or like on your, like, how do I look right now? I'm kind of self-conscious. That part, I definitely wanted to lean into. And then Michelle, she ran accounting with me at Parts Tech. And it was really cool to be able to pick up the phone and call her and be like, I need you to help me build my business now. And like, I've trusted her implicitly. She's like a person, like I would give her the login to my personal bank account and I would never think twice about it. So Matthew will handle negotiations and partnerships. She'll handle everything from signing the contract to collections and then the accounting part of it. And because we have so many different like product lines now, that takes a lot of work. And then we recently brought on Sarah to head up the operations, which is everything from the scheduling and the podcast cadence, making sure that like we have all the copy from our advertisers. And then where I think the puck is going is my buddy Brian helps out on the recruiting side, which is the newest part of this.
Like, how are you thinking about the recruiting side of it? Because it's this really cool natural outgrowth of building a community that makes a ton of sense, but not a lot of people think about it as they're building the community. But it's the most natural thing in the world for someone to come along for the ride, become a fan of what you talk about, and then say, hey man, I'm actually having a really hard time building my team. Do you know anybody? It's like, well, yeah, I know thousands of people, and now it's just another way to kind of monetize a community. So what is that going to look like for you?
First of all, I've never got along with recruiters as a CFO. I've hated paying them. I've hated interacting with them. I've just had no bueno experiences.
I'm sure all the recruiters listening are just fine, but there's a lot of not so great ones out there.
Yeah, I'm the ones who are listening. You're great.
You guys are awesome. Yeah.
Send us a message. We'll send you a hat or something. But people kept bringing it up. And in the back of my head, I always thought, hey, there's something to be said about most tech companies, right, Paul? They go out and they build a product and there's a ton of technical risk. And there's a ton of execution risk. And then they say, All right, now we got to go find the customers. What I've essentially done is this whole cycle in reverse where I built the customer list, which takes away a lot of the risk. And then I say, hey guys, please tell me what product you want.
Yeah, would you like one of these?
Would you like one of these? And recruiting was the one that people kept raising their hands on. And I kept saying, no, no, no. And then in 1 month, all at the same time, 2 CFOs I was friends with over beers, you said, I will give you money to go and hire these people.
Please take my money, for the love of God. Yeah.
And so I texted my friend Brian and said, hey, Brian, I have a recruiting business, period. I don't know how to run a recruiting business. He's been my longtime friend and we've been getting that off the ground now. But like what we realized is it's not recruiting, it's matchmaking, because I'm not a recruiter by nature. And I've been in the roles before of both the person getting hired and doing the hiring. And what we said is we want to be different. We want to be really fucking easy for CFOs to work with. We want it to just be outcome based because I hate paying 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And we only want to focus on extremely specific roles. So it's manager, director, and VP of FP&A, or manager, director, and VP of accounting. We're not trying to be everything to everyone.
It's board meeting season right now, and I'm having conversations with a few of my CEOs right now about strategy, which I think is the most confusing word in business, because if you ask 10 people for definition of what is strategy, you get 10 different answers. I think strategy is 3 things. I think it's figuring out what's going on. I think it's figuring out what your options are for dealing with the biggest challenge or opportunity and what's going on. And then it's building a plan to go make that kind of guiding direction happen. So taking that framework and this idea of like identifying the challenge or the opportunity, declaring that you're going to do this instead of that, and then going and making it happen. Think about the next couple of years of what this business becomes. Like, what is your guys' strategy and what do you think is the biggest thing that you're going to have to figure out, overcome, or deal with to get to the next level?
So my favorite book in the world, it's called Once a Runner. And there's this guy, Quentin Cassidy, and he's been training in the woods to basically compete in this big mile event where he wants to beat all these people that he looked up to before. And it is excruciatingly hard, but also excruciatingly boring. My favorite line in the book is, Quentin, to be the best at anything, you have to be comfortable with being a little bit bored. And I always try to come back to not trying to do all these things that pop up. Even like the recruiting thing scares me, I'll admit, a bit, because it's like, that's not the main thing. And I totally appreciate that literally no one's going to want to work with me if my writing isn't good and if my podcasting isn't good. The big goal, if I was to put it on a sign, is to be the best business media company in the world. But more specifically, right now, I want to be the best business podcast and newsletter for the C-suite at private equity and venture-backed companies. Extremely specific. And if I go even further, I want to be that for the CFO who's been in my shoes before, who's navigating these circumstances. And what I've found is when I do that and I yell loud enough to that one person that I'm thinking about, and maybe it's even the person who's 5 years away from becoming that position, the other people show up. And that's been the weirdest realization to me. So I did the stats in the audience the other day, Paul. 15% of our audience are now CEOs in seats. I never once sat down and said, I'm going to write something for a CEO, but they showed up. And so like, that's the opportunity. I think it becomes over time, but you don't get that opportunity if you don't do a really great job. It's not boring. It's not different to wake up every morning, walk my dog at the same time, go for a run and sit down and write something about go-to-market strategy or finance. But there is beauty in that craft.
I totally agree. Have you read any of Stephen Pressfield's stuff?
Oh yeah, he's great.
He's kind of amazing too from a content strategy perspective, because he wrote a bunch of great stuff, and then he kind of turned his eyes on the craft of writing, and he wrote The War of Art, which I just gave to one of my teammates yesterday who's starting to put stuff out there. Shout out to Nico. But he realized there's a couple underdeveloped ideas in The War of Art, and he took those and he turned those into books. And one of those books is called Do the Work. And it's exactly what you're talking about. It's like there comes a point where you actually don't need to do new stuff. Like, yeah, go find your other revenue stream and be innovative and try new things, but you gotta be comfortable being bored and just sitting down at the desk and doing the thing again. And I think what you didn't say, like the way I think about that as somebody who's half-assing my own newsletter thing on the side, wondering what it will become, what you're actually tapping into is like the form of compound interest that comes from putting your ideas out there for long enough. Because before you know it, you turn around and you got a big pile of stuff that sounds like you, that's there on the internet for anybody to find. And even if you like take a week off, people show up because they've serendipitously found that stuff. And I think that's the coolest thing. And I also think it taps right into the idea that you're talking about here, which is like, you kind of know what the business is. The atomic unit of the business is putting great content out there that people want to interact with. And I think what you're saying, back to the original question, is the biggest obstacle is boredom. So you got to get boredom out of the way. And the way you get boredom out of the way is you got to be comfortable being bored and don't take it as a signal that you're off track. And I totally agree with that.
I was talking to Vanna Krantz, and she was the CFO at Disney Plus. Shocked these people come on my podcast. You're really going to pick up the opponents.
That's a
Spend
good
an
one.
hour with a little CJ. But the advice that she said she would give to her younger self is just stay in the game. And what she meant is don't interrupt the compounding, because the moment you do that, you've stopped. And you can't look back in 4 years and be like, oh, how did I get to 70,000 subscribers? It's because I started writing in December of 2020 and nobody listened to me for the first 2 years. And guess what? That's the moat. So I was in San Francisco. I go into a gift store like a good dad to get my daughters something. Naturally, I buy myself something instead. I got them something later. But I got this hat because it spoke to me, and it just said, keep doing hard things. You got to wake up and do something hard every day, or you're going to get soft.
There are probably people listening to this who are not CFOs, who are not listening because they want the tactical playbook on how to be really great in that role. There's probably people listening to this because they like the feel and the quality of the content, whether they're a marketing person or somebody writing their own newsletter, just somebody like admiring the craft, to use your word. What advice would you give to that person who's like, hey, I kind of want to do what CJ's doing for my business or for myself, and I want his like 90-second executive coaching or best piece of advice on how to take the goodness of this business and the goodness of what you're building and apply that to some other area? What would you tell that person?
Stop writing or making content for this fictional, intelligent person you have in your mind that you think is out there. Because I did that for over a year and a half, and I didn't find content market fit until I started writing for myself in the voice that I think in the voice that I talk to other people. And to some people, it's going to rub them the wrong way because it comes across, I don't know, maybe at times is a little crass or a little basic or not as smart as like a lot of people online appear to be. But like I was trying to write for this person who I thought was out there. There's like this image in my mind of this extremely intelligent person. Maybe they had done banking before, and now they did private equity, and they're a CFO and they know everything. And I got to talk to them in these words they're sharp around the edges. And I would never want to be friends with this person. Why am I writing for this fictional person? And when I started writing just as myself and how I thought and let my guard down, I created an on-ramp. So my advice is to create an on-ramp for people to feel like they can participate in the work. If you try to keep a barrier up or you try to sound bigger than you are in the moment, people will sniff that out, and people aren't going to want to hang out with you every week. And that's essentially what my content is. It's I hope you like me enough to hang out with me.
I think you can always tell when someone's written something online, or, video's easy to tell too, but it's even more fun to sniff it out in written form. Can you tell if the person's having fun? I can always tell. And I'm always more interested in reading that thing when I can tell that the person is having fun than the person who is like showing up to the interview with the tie that's a little too tight because they're worried about being judged or how they're going to show up. Like, loosen the tie up, man. Just talk how you talk, and your content's going to be better for it.
And the other thing I would add to that is once you find that voice, you have to give away everything as generously as possible. You can't be like, I'm going to save that for later. Like, just do it. Put it on the page and send it. Like, it's competitive out there. Like, I'm competing not just against other newsletters. I'm competing against anything else that takes your time. You could be listening to a Nickelback album right now, but instead you're listening to this.
I have to go. I didn't know that was an option for me. So
Somebody's turning this off and being like,
Yeah.
I haven't tuned in to Creed in a while.
that's a great idea.
You have to give it away so they're so overloaded with value from what they got that they appreciate it and they want to share it. You can mobilize the people who are reading it to share it by making them smarter and making them look better. And I think that's the job of any newsletter or podcast. At least for mine, it's to help you get better at your job. So honestly, you can make more money and you can look good.
Yeah. And what you're talking about is the B word, right? Brand. Like especially in B2B world, I think brand is also the most misunderstood word out there, because too often people synonymize it with like, oh yeah, brand, it's the Department of Shapes and Colors inside of marketing somewhere, right? And that's not it. Like a brand is what you have when you've compounded for long enough, and it comprises how you make people feel, and it comprises what they've told other people about you is maybe the most important part of your brand. If you're writing in a way that delights you as the writer, and you're paying attention to what people love about it, and you can just keep going, you're going to wake up one day and you're going to have a brand, and that brand is going to be a competitive advantage. And part of the fun is you don't actually know what it's going to be until you put enough stuff out there.
I was talking to this friend and he's like, you should stop telling people like how you build your business, and you should stop telling them that like it makes money, and
they're going to steal it because they could just copy your approach.
And for like 10 seconds, I was like, damn, he's right. Someone's going to like control C, control P this. I don't want to like invite competition. Like nobody in business wants to do that, but like it's the innovation stack by Jim McKelvey, the guy who invented Square with Jack Dorsey.
Yes.
Like there are about 17 unique things that I've piled on at different points that even I didn't know I was doing to get to this point. Like, you know what? Jeff Bezos makes a lot of money running Amazon. I cannot wake up tomorrow and just create Amazon. So that's why like I'm more comfortable talking about it at this point, because I wish there was someone who was more of a friend to me at that time when I was in the wilderness with a hatchet trying to figure it out. I don't know how somebody could just pick up and be like, tomorrow I have something that is unit. You can't out me. I'm a weird person. You can't like clone CJ. Even the AI isn't good enough yet to get my like weird tone.
Part of the reason I think we connect is I'm a writer.
A great writer.
Thanks, man. Well, the last question I want to ask you is, like, you're way ahead of me in terms of turning your thing into a business and building a huge audience and all that. I'm having fun doing my thing as a little side gig to this day job of being a private equity operating partner. But you've read my stuff. You know what I put out there. Like, what would your advice be to somebody like me who's got a couple thousand subscribers, still finding the way, has no idea what it's going to turn into, if anything?
Ride the horse in the direction it's going.
I like that encouraging vector.
I think you also have to think, what am I uniquely qualified to do in a way that gives me energy? So this is probably a more vulnerable story, but like I had this moment where I was interviewing Dominic, the CFO of Samsara. Okay. Paul, this guy was impeccable. He was fucking excellent. And there were a lot of CFOs who I had interviewed up to that point where I said, I think I could step into that role, or I could credibly work towards becoming that person.
Yep.
It happened at other points in my career. Like it's when you see LeBron James dunk a basketball, you're like, well, I'm not 6'9" and I can't do that. But you
like
see
that's
somebody
next
who
level.
looks like you, who's around your age. And I felt like I don't think I'm ever going to be able to be him. So part of me was appreciating how great he was at his job, the command of the numbers, what he was doing. Part of it was like me turning the lens on myself, being like,
oh shit,
am I okay never being able to get to that point?
Yeah.
And this is mid-podcast. I'm like having this realization with this guy. And it was funny because towards the end of the conversation, he started to get into his career arc, and he said, you know, I feel fortunate that everything lined up in the way that it did. Like it started with where I went to college, right? Then it started with me getting that job at Morgan Stanley that everybody else wanted. Then it was me working on the right IPO for the right CFO, who was Mike Scarpelli at the time for ServiceNow, to then get an opportunity to learn from him. Then it was me doing well at ServiceNow to be able to get the opportunities to run FP&A and IR, and then the timing of the markets to have an exit there and then get a job at Samsara. And so it was like all these things he'd stacked together. But what really stood out to me is you could tell how much this guy loved what he did. And I also said to myself, it's not just the opportunities that he's had up until this point that have been great. It's like any great athlete, you also have to want to be better at it and work at it. You can't just have the opportunities. You also have to be able to wake up with that energy every day. And I said, I love being a CFO, but like that guy really loves being a CFO. But then I said, you know what? I love what I'm doing just as much. And I think I'm actually uniquely qualified to, I think, work to be world-class in that. And so there was this point of like reflection where I was like, fuck. And then it was a point of like, oh no, wait, this means like I found what I want to do in the game that I want to keep playing. I don't know. I just wanted to share that moment with you because it's kind of like all coming full circle now that I'm full-time on it.
I agree with you. I do think you're uniquely qualified. It's also just getting going, and the fact that you've been able to build so much momentum. From where I sit, you're in a very cool place, which is like you can see where it's headed, and you can see that you actually don't have to do that much different stuff to keep the momentum going. But you're also like a very curious guy, and you're okay like discovering what it becomes along the way. And I've talked to a bunch of entrepreneurs, founders, and software companies, and it's not that they're not concerned about the future. It's just like they're enjoying the discovering aspect of building a business. So I guess what I'm saying is like, I see that in you. I'm excited to see where this business goes. And I'm glad we could have a conversation that hopefully lets other people in on what you're building and how it works. This is cool.
No, I appreciate you. I appreciate the friendship we've built, and I appreciate you pulling all this stuff out of me because a bunch of people have asked for this before, and I'm like, I don't think people are curious. And you're like, CJ, no, like they want to know. So thanks for holding my feet to the fire here.
Yeah, man, this is cool. Thanks for having me.
Run the Numbers is a mostly media production. Yelling and intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by Meg D'Alessandro. Show is executive produced by Ben Hillman. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog way too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses. LOL. If you like this podcast, hit subscribe and give us 5 stars. It will take like 2 seconds and our algorithm overlords love it. Drink water, call your mom, and have a great day. Peace.